Hey everyone, today I am going to talk about Tums for goats because I know this gets suggested a lot on Facebook. And I used to think that the only problem with it was that most people were not suggesting that you use enough of it to actually help a goat with hypocalcemia. However, I've recently become aware of someone who was using so much of it that her goat got too much calcium and wound up with zinc deficiency. So I thought this is a good time to talk about Tums. Like, what is in Tums? And when it is and is not appropriate to use it, because I've seen problems with it pretty much all across the board. The bottom line is that Tums is not an important, you shouldn't be giving Tums to your goats on a regular basis. If you have a goat with hypocalcemia, which happens like at the very end of pregnancy or right after the goat kids because she doesn't have enough calcium, then and you have nothing else and it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, you have Tums, that is something you can try to see if that can at least keep her alive until morning, until you can get to the farm store to get calcium gluconate, or contact your vet to have the goat treated with intravenous calcium. The thing that is that's frustrating. So first of all, there's a lot of overdiagnosis of hypocalcemia on Facebook. A lot of people saying, oh, your goat has hypocalcemia, you need to give her a couple of Tums. And especially if somebody just tells you, give your goat 2 Tums or 3 Tums or whatever, without even telling you a dosage, right there that they don't actually know what they're talking about. They don't actually know the dosage that a goat needs if they have true hypocalcemia. Because first of all, Tums comes in 2 different sizes. And so there's a 500 milligram and there's 1,000 milligram. And obviously there's a huge difference between those. Number 2 is that to treat hypocalcemia in a goat, you would need like about 4,000 or 5,000 milligrams of calcium. And so if you have 500 milligrams, you would need to give your goat 8 or 10 of those. And I don't think I've ever seen that. Like, I don't hang out on Facebook groups anymore, but I don't think I've ever seen that suggested in a group. Like that's the dosage that you would need to give a goat. If you have 1,000 milligrams, then it would need to be 4 or 5 of those. So a couple of Tums is not going to do anything for a goat if they truly do have hypocalcemia. But the reason that people think it does is because they're overdiagnosing it. So you've got a placebo thing going on here. Somebody thinks, oh, my goat has hypocalcemia. They give it a couple of Tums and then they think the goat is better. Well, the reality is the goat wasn't sick to begin with, because if she was, 1,000 milligrams of Tums or 2,000 milligrams even is not going to help her. Like, that is not going to pull a goat out of hypocalcemia. In fact, I recently had one of my Goats 365 members had a goat that did have full-blown hypocalcemia with all the symptoms, and including the very low body temperature. And she did give her 5,000 milligrams of Tums, and it did not make a difference. She had to get the injectable calcium gluconate to give the goat in order to help her. So calcium carbonate is not very well absorbed. It is actually rock. Like, just Google, what is calcium carbonate? And it's basically natural forms or sedimentary rock, such as chalk, limestone, as well as metamorphic rock like marble. And so it's a very cheap form of calcium and not the best absorbed. So like if a human has a calcium deficiency, that if you talk to somebody who actually knows a lot about nutrition, not the Tums marketing people, they're going to suggest a different form of calcium for you that would be better absorbed than that one. And like I said, for goats, calcium gluconate injected sub-Q into small doses, multiple places around the goat, is a better treatment. And if a goat is in really bad shape, then you might need to contact your vet to get intravenous treatment with calcium. And you really need to get a vet to do the intravenous treatment, because if you give calcium too fast IV, it can cause heart block, which will kill your goat. So using IV calcium is definitely not for someone who isn't experienced with it. Now, on the flip side of the Tums story, I recently became aware of someone who had been giving her goat Tums, like 4,000 milligrams of Tums, for 6 weeks, and her goat wound up zinc deficient. So she started doing it because she thought her goat had hypocalcemia, and then she thought that she needed to keep doing it because she thought her goat needed this much calcium on a regular basis. And so who knows if the goat really did have hypocalcemia or not. And even if calcium carbonate is not very well absorbed, if you give 4,000 milligrams to a goat for 6 weeks, they are going to wind up with too much calcium in their system. And so calcium is a zinc antagonist, and that caused the goat to become zinc deficient and start blowing her coat in a really extreme manner. So you don't normally see zinc deficiency in does that are milking, because especially not, within the first couple months after kidding, because they need so much calcium. Like ideally they should be eating hay that is 100% alfalfa, because that has a really high amount of calcium in it. And so that's really what milkers need. Goats should have hay at the last 2 months of pregnancy. Goats should have hay that is 50% to 100% alfalfa. This is one of the areas where we just got lucky and wound up, this guy, when we moved out here, this guy pulled into our driveway and said, "Hey, do you want to buy my alfalfa?" And I was like, "Sure." I didn't even know there was a difference between grass and alfalfa, but luckily I had milk goats that needed it. And so we've never had a case of hypocalcemia because my goats have always had 100% alfalfa hay. So if your goats are getting 100% alfalfa hay, it is very unlikely that you're going to have trouble with hypocalcemia. Unlike cows, so the reason cows usually get hypocalcemia is because of milk production. Goats usually get it because of trying to grow multiple fetuses or successfully growing multiple fetuses. We've had 8 sets of quintuplets and more quads than I can count. In fact, we've already had a set of quads this year. Every year we have multiple sets of quads because we've got genetics in our herd that are super ovulators, and they just like to make a lot of babies every year. And so we've never had a case, knock on wood, we've never had a case of hypocalcemia or toxemia, but we've always fed 100% alfalfa to our does because like I said, we just got lucky in the beginning. And then I found out about the importance of alfalfa, and I'm like, oh, wow, finally I got lucky and I did something right without knowing that I needed to be doing it, which it felt like that never happened to me in the early years. It felt like we were always getting unlucky and, with our well water and all that kind of stuff. So the bottom line is your goats would not be walking around eating lots of limestone every day if they had their choice of foods. And so it's really important that you give your pregnant does and your milkers alfalfa hay to prevent hypocalcemia, and that if you do something like Tums, that it's not the best treatment. And the thing too to know about this is if your goat has hypocalcemia and you give them those Tums, they should be 100% better within an hour. If they're not, then it didn't work. You should not have to be giving your goat all these crazy things that I have seen. People are like, oh, well, on Facebook, somebody said to do this magic potion thing that's a mix of all these things. And I'm like, all those things are going to do nothing for a goat with hypocalcemia. If you give a goat calcium and they have hypocalcemia, they are fine. Depending on how you give it, if you give it to them orally, they should be in good shape within an hour. If you give it to them sub-Q, half an hour. You give it to them IV, even faster. So this is not something to mess around with. Many, many years ago, I lost a goat because I did not understand that. She actually had mastitis. She had a cold floppy udder. And I thought she had hypocalcemia. And I did not know that, like, oh, if you treat for hypocalcemia and they don't improve within an hour, you don't mess around giving them more calcium. You call the vet to find out what is really wrong with them. Um, so that is also one of the huge dangers of people not understanding like how these things are treated, or what kind of a dosage you need, how fast you should see a response, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, we go into this in a lot more depth in both in my nutrition course, and then also in the kidding course. And the nutrition course is part of Goats 365, so that you can learn more about like the nutrients that goats actually need, and the best way for them to get it. And of course, the best way is always for them to get it orally through natural foods like alfalfa, not through something like Tums that they're going to eat because it's sweet and really not the best thing for them, especially long term. So if you have any questions, post in the comment section below, and